And well, that was honestly quite terrible and hard. But we got it to work better. Um, and then I started on a previous Hercules CI called Legacy now. It's completely unrelated to what we're doing now, but we just kept the name. Um, and that was an open source project. And then I figured out that making a CI is actually a lot of work, and then a lot of people underestimate how much. So I started thinking what to do. Um, and I came to conclusion that it should be built in pieces. So I made Cachix at the time. But I also met Robert, and he was working on an XCI as well, following his own complete different steps. So we started chatting now and then about what we're doing. Um, and then once I launched Cachix, just a couple of months later, we decided to meet up. I was living in Lisbon at that time, so yeah, we met actually with Jonas as well, and Robert and me, and I said just come here to Lisbon. I live here. It's pretty good weather, so in the worst case, we'll have a good time. In the best case, we'll make some plans, and yeah, then there we agreed to for me and Robert to start this journey.
Sounds cool. Could you are you prepared to give a demo of Cachix or Hercules and how it all fits together?
Yeah, I can share my screen and show a bit how it works. Um, yeah, so let's try to do that. Let me just see which one there are. Can you see my screen?
Yes, but could you zoom in quite a lot?
Sure. Something like this, I guess. Um, right. So this is kind of the job page. This is like if you push a commit, which is going to build a bunch of attributes. Um, So what we've been working mostly is doing the backend work. So the front end doesn't display everything we already have. So that's going to be in the next months. We're gonna start working more on visibility, so that what's going on in the CI and things like that. But anyway, what you see right now is that evaluation and the build checks are separate. You see a bunch of metadata from GitHub and what has been built. Um, and we have a bunch of documentation here. Maybe I should start here. So right now, if you go to getting started, you have instructions how to set up your own agents. So the idea is that you host them on your own infrastructure. And maybe just a few words why we decided on that. There is a bunch of CIs today, like GitHub or Travis or Circle CI and so on. But the problem with these CIs is like, first of all the Nix integrations there have significant overhead. So it takes like a minute to install Nix and everything on GitHub, and similar on Travis. And on top of that, you have like quite slow hardware. Virtualized hardware there. So we decided that in order to provide the best experience, you need to have a machine with a disk cache, um, and then the CI really can be fast. Here is our instructions how to deploy it. We have instructions just using Nix, and that's what we call manual deployment. We have instructions for macOS, NixOS, NixOps, and now just as of actually today, there's also instructions to deploy with Terraform. Um, but anyway, that's how you deploy your own agent. And yeah, if you go to if you go to the account page, you can see your agents, and it will show if they're online currently, and a bunch of things like platforms, what kind of features flags they have, the version, and so on. And yeah, that's pretty much what you can see on this page right now. So I don't know, maybe I can push something to show how it works.
Yeah, how
Yeah,
does someone
what?
push to a barn to the Kashyyyks?
Sorry?
How does someone actually push? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's built with GitHub apps. This is kind of a semi-new thing from GitHub. I think it's like a year-old feature.
Yeah, I think it's a beta feature, right?
Yeah, I think that it still is, but it's not really. I don't know. It's a bit weird with GitHub right now. Everything is a beta feature, it seems. But it's been in that phase for like, I think a year and a half or something, if I don't remember correctly.
Cool.
That's quite
Yeah.
a long
Why
beta.
don't you do a demo and do a push, and let's watch a build.
All right. Let's see.
Yeah, so I think, World of Peace, you were asking about pushing to Kashyyyk specifically. And the way that works with Hercules CI, it's basically you configure per GitHub account which cache it should push to, and you never think about it again. It's all configured.
That sounds
That's the general
ideal.
idea. Yeah. Yeah, there's some improvements still to be made there. But it's a very good solution for most use cases.
So
Okay,
Robert, while Doman goes to push something and demonstrate this, earlier he mentioned that Hercules can do things that general CI can't. Tiltner on IRC is wondering if you could point out a couple of things, or just mention a couple of things for now.
Right. Yeah. So I think, well, the main point is that it integrates with Nix, right? So you get a lot of the benefits of Nix, and yeah. So the way things are done, they basically steer towards setting things up that it's reproducible. It's not guaranteed right now. You can do things like the impure fetch tarball if you really want to. So I think that's important too, right? You can use some loopholes if necessary. But the general idea is that it's reproducible, and that's pretty hard to achieve, I think, on most CI systems where you're usually patching together all sorts of procedural stuff, mutating your Git repositories and software repositories or whatever. And with Nix, you basically get the whole benefit of immutability. So I think we can say that it's a time traveling CI, which is just
what does that mean?
Yeah, I stole that from Elm, the Elm language. They have a time traveling debugger because everything is like functional and immutable. Basically means you can go back in time and look at previous events, how they affected the state of the system. And I think our RCI is in a way quite similar to that you can go back to a previous commit and be pretty confident that it'll produce the same result, or if you make a change based on that commit, that'll actually work as expected, which is not a guarantee that that CI systems generally provide. Right?
Sure. So Doman, it looks like maybe you're at a point.
Yeah, sure. Let's try to do this. So I'm just gonna push a commit now. It should show up here. There you go. So one of the cool things we're doing, for example, is we're evaluating on the fly And as each attribute is evaluated, it's already pushed to the CI. This is quite nice to see progress. And you can see now it's pushed all the attributes and it's building hello, and it's super fast because it downloads it just from Nix cache. So yeah, as I said, like one of the biggest advantages is that it's really, really fast since it has everything available to build. And we generally recommend using like bare metal for speed up. But to add upon the question of why is it so special, for example, Robert mostly spent quite some time building really good support for import from derivation. And for example, on Hydra or any other CI, if you do import from derivation, you can't use more than one platform because you're going to mix evaluation and build time. And if you have macOS builds during evaluation, it's not going to be able to dispatch those. That's actually quite a huge problem for companies as they grow. They start building tools with import derivation from derivation because that saves a lot of manual work. But then once you have to support a one-on-one platform, it becomes a bottleneck. And the second thing that also helps in our case is that evaluations are dispatched just as builds, and so it scales, right? In Hydra's case, for example, it's a bottleneck.
That's
so
cool.
in most, so if you have a lot of machines, it can take quite some time to evaluate. So, sorry.
So can Hercules support like post build actions? Like say we've built my application, now I want to deploy it. Does it support impure actions like that?
Yeah, so it doesn't support it right now, but actually coming up in the next months, we have three major goals. So one of them is no source control access. That's a feature that when we've been talking to companies, quite a lot of them have, since they have different contracts that they cannot share it and so on. So that's something we'll have to implement. And the second one is impure builds. So of course, like ideally everything would be built by Nix, but there's internet you have to talk to, and that's something we have to build yet. And the third one is going to be visibility, as I said before, having more insight what's going on. So about the impure builds, we're going to start with something quite simple. And then, I mean, we have some pretty cool ideas, but in the current case with our resources, we're going to build something simple to start with, and then I think build on top of that. But in general, you should be able to run something before the CI starts evaluating, and after it's built, you should be able to like execute something with those build derivations, right?
That sounds pretty good. Yeah, I think that's for me, a common problem that I have with Hydra is, okay, so I have Hydra, I've done all my builds, now how do I get it into production? And I've sort of worked around that with long polling and things like that, but having a built-in way to have something execute would be really nice.
Yeah, so we haven't really decided how to do that, but one of ideas is would be just to have an attribute on a derivation to say like impure is true or whatever, and that would like flag that derivation as an executable that you run after outside of Nix. And you could even build graphs with that, and since it's a derivation, then it already supports graphs and so on. So yeah, I mean, one of our goals as well, and that's something we're quite conscious about, is that we want people to, whatever they run locally, it should work the same way as on CI. So once you go into the impure world, that becomes quite tricky. but we will try our best to support that as well, because we don't want people to go into the familiar feedback loop when you're waiting on the CI and commit stuff, and it's quite a waste. So since we have Nix, we don't necessarily need it to develop, and we think of it more like a semaphore or a gatekeeper. Um, so yeah, that's another set of features we want to build at some point. But yeah, I agree. The impure builds are really important in when you actually have to do something um, nowadays in the DevOps world.
Doman, I do have a question. This is something I did see on your FAQ. It is that like I think it's the Cachix backend that's closed source, and I'm not actually sure if it was explained there what the motivation is for that. But if you could explain that, that would be nice.
Yeah. So
I do understand you're also in a private beta currently, right?
yes. So the motivation is the following. When I explained before, when I did a bunch of experiments with CI before I started Cachix, I was looking a lot into like, okay, how do we make this happen? How do we have a good CI? And I was experimenting a lot with open source, um, and trying to get companies to pay and so on. And that turned out not to work really well. Um, so I looked into a lot of different open source models, and essentially there's not many, as we know. So after evaluating all of them, back then I already was leaning towards this, and then with Robert we decided to keep the backend things closed source. And the major reason is it's just that we couldn't find an open source model to support this. The open core wouldn't work because our community is too small. Um, and the support model is pretty much dead since Red Hat was acquired by IBM and so on. And we knew that it's a lot of work. So the question was, if we work on this for 2 years and we open source and give it to everyone, um, that's just not going to work for us. Yeah, so that's
understood. Can you tell me a little bit about what it feels like to quit your job and hook your wagon up to Nix and work on the Nix ecosystem tool full time? That sounds, to me, that sounds like a dream, and also sounds a bit scary.
yes. So, I mean, I guess I can speak for Robert. He can say for himself. But for me, it was really one of the best decisions. Even if I don't believe it will, but even if everything fails, I'm still happy to do it. It's really, I don't know. One of the things I really missed is being creative and build things that people want and need and use. And it's always hard to find a place in a company like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can
So
understand that. Most companies don't really value that co-creative side of things.
yeah, exactly right.
So you
So
were
I
sort
mean,
of
if
like searching to find your own sort of creative freedom to help people.
yeah, exactly. Um, and so I personally I'm also, I started with open source. I grew up in open source, so it means a lot to me. Mostly the people, not the source code, but it's part of what makes it so. So and yeah, I mean, for me, it's been, I think my life improved quite a lot in general, with like self-fulfillment or whatever you want to say. But on the other hand, it's also hard working on something that is going to take years to really um, get the momentum. So we're built to get rewards very instantly.
Mm.
So it can be quite challenging to work for months and see no result. Well, it depends how you measure it, right? In lines of code, of course there is, but of people giving you feedback and saying they're happy. That takes a while. So yeah, but that's changing now, and it's really funny to see that.
I think the last
Sorry.
part kind of cut out there for me.
Yeah, at the very
yeah,
end.
so
Go ahead.
yeah, let me just double. All right. Yeah, so I said that it's really fulfilling the last couple of months to see things actually finally people are using it more and getting good feedback. So it's nice to finally see that people appreciate results and they find useful.
Cool. I see we have a question from Vaibhav.
Yeah, so I signed up for the preview, and I remember like getting really excited when I first had access to it, and it said that I didn't see the steps about running it on NixOS at all. I just saw like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, step 7, and I was like, no, I don't have time for this right now, and I haven't gone back to it since then. That's something that kind of like intimidated me from trying it. And I just signed in again to like my dashboard, and it's still like I can't see the NixOS thing right now either. So how like is that recent, or how easy is it to set up on if I just have like a NixOS laptop?
Yeah, it's quite easy. So we just released 0.5 version of the agent, which simplifies some of the setup. So I mean, we worked for and mostly Robert and also me for the last couple of months, just focusing on making these steps simple and reducing them and so on, and just really doing the the hard physical work, I would say. But it's not updated on the front end yet. If you go to the docs page, you're going to see these options. So what you see there is only the NixOS steps and the macOS steps. But for example, Terraform that we just released, as I said, is going to be much simpler. So yeah, we have to update the front end, and that's also one of the last things we have to do before we're gonna just publicly launch, so that people are aware that there's many ways to deploy it right now.
Wonderful. Do you have any further points you'd like to make before we move on to the next segment where we might review a pull request?
Yeah, so I don't know. I spoke a bit about what we're gonna do. Yeah, so mainly, I mean, we've been using it internally, and there's a bunch of people already testing it. So what we are really looking for is feedback. No matter how harsh or whatever you have to usually people assume that you already know things, but it's turns out it's quite hard to get feedback. So we really encourage everyone to if they've played out and if they're unhappy, to tell us, and just like send me an email.
Oh, okay. So
and tell me.
if someone has an issue, where can they ask that? If they have an issue like Vahabib had, where would they express that?
So I think the easiest way is there is like a contact link at the bottom, and that gets to our help email address. I think that's the best way, through email,
Oh,
so we
okay.
can like properly take time and answer it. But you can also, if you want to just talk with me, also send a time where you're available, and we can schedule a call and chat about it if that's easier for you.
Okay, great.
Sounds good. Thank you. Does anybody else in the in either the IRC or the Zoom chat have any questions?
Yeah, any questions for Doman and Robert? I'll give it 1 minute.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, another question. So this seems very similar to BuildKite in the sense where you run the CI agent on your own infrastructure. Is there any plans or any idea about having a hosted CI service where you take care of everything, including the machine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't go ahead.
No, you can say it.
Okay, sure. I guess I haven't been speaking a lot. Yeah, so of course we thought about this, and it's a very interesting idea. It really lowers the sort of the barrier, like Vaibhav was encountering. If you can just get some number of free minutes or whatever. Yeah, it's definitely something we've considered. But right now, with the resources we have, it doesn't seem quite as feasible. So we don't plan to build it yet. But who knows, maybe sometime in the far future.
Do you have anything? So I think about BuildKite. BuildKite has a similar model where you run their agent on your own hardware. They don't provide any sort of hosted system for the agents, but they do have a push button setup that will create machines in AWS, and then they'll only run while there are BuildKite jobs that are ready to run. Or have you considered offering something like that?
Yeah, we do. We don't offer it yet, but that's definitely sort of the direction we want to go. So we're basically releasing the Terraform setup this week, coming week. And that's basically also a starting point for doing this more fancy auto scaling and scale to zero kind of thing. So that's definitely something we want to provide.
That's really cool. What have been some of the challenges of authoring and integrating with Nix? Like, what have been some major surprises along the way?
Right. I think one of the hard things was actually building the agent, because to get the information we need, we actually need to write C++ code. But most of our software is in Haskell, so we had to do some foreign function interface stuff, and like dig through the Nix code base. I think that was quite a bit harder than well, at least I had hoped. FFI is usually not particularly easy, and I mean you're dealing with two garbage collectors, for instance, right? So you have to be careful. So I think that was surprising.
That's interesting. Have you considered extending Nix to have access to the information you need? Or can you tell me a little bit about what you needed to access that you couldn't access otherwise?
Right. So I think the main thing is you need to like talk to the evaluator. Evaluator is basically a C++ library that lets you manipulate Nix expressions and values. But it's not really set up specifically for this purpose. And some of the harder code to write was for the import from derivation. The way we did it, we tried to modify Nix the least as possible. It's basically just a couple of lines of patched code right now. But it's not the prettiest, the way we've implemented it. So I think definitely in the future it's worthwhile to adapt Nix to make this kind of thing easier. That will also benefit, say, tools like NixOS or Arion for that matter. Particularly Arion actually, because that's also Haskell now since this week. So that's definitely something we'll do at some point.
Very cool. Maybe we can have you all come and talk about Arion a little bit.
I would like that.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. All right. Well, very good. I don't see any further questions on IRC or in Zoom. So maybe there's something else you could show quickly or talk about quickly, or we could end a few minutes early.
I guess maybe I can just say a bit more about what's hard. So, I mean, one thing is like building like a distributed scheduler is never easy. But it wasn't, I guess, that surprising because that's a pretty known problem. Yeah, I think the hardest bit is that CI is quite a fragile thing. You're basically connecting a lot of things together, and it requires quite some either experimentation or knowledge, and preferably both, to make it robust. Um, so I think that's quite common in other CIs to see it fail. So we've really been trying to, as even with the choice of Haskell and so on, we've been trying to make it reliable. And we're using like structured logging and a bunch of other tricks we've learned so far to really know what's going on. And like things like event sourcing, so that you can keep the history of things, and so on. So there's um yeah, I think it's a lot of underneath. It's similar like packaging, like you say, oh, how hard can it be? You just have to package software. It's pretty easy, just like build it and copy it, and then you see all these kinds of things. And I think the CI is just, you know, even harder in that sense, because you have to operate with the world of internet. So there's always new surprises for us there. But I guess they accumulate. None of them on their own aren't really as big. It's just the sum of them, I would say.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any aspirations of Hercules being able to, say, replace Hydra, like build all like 40,000 jobs in Nix packages, for example?
Yeah, of course. So one of our customers is building like 30,000 Haskell packages, basically whole stackage, and that works. So yeah, I mean we haven't been really heavily investing, honestly, into like load testing, but that was a good test, and it worked without a problem. Um, there's some things we have to improve, like the front end needs to know a bit better how to render 30,000 attributes and stuff like that. But those are really low hanging fruits.
Yeah.
So yeah, we want to do that, but at the same time, we don't want to push on community too much right now, because I know everybody is a bit skeptical. So we want to work with companies, and build trust with them first. And once we are ready to support community better, that's my goal at heart. But I know it's just we have to take steps together.
Very cool. All right. Well,
Excellent.
that's really impressive. 30,000 is that's a big number.
And you said it went off without a hitch? Really? Wow.
Yeah, it worked pretty well. As
I
I said,
wouldn't.
the front end is a bit slow as you scroll and things like that, but I already know how to fix those things. So
Yeah, and Hydra already has that problem.
yeah, yeah, and it turns out we're using Elm, so we just need to do the rendering of the nodes properly with a bit of laziness, and it should work pretty good.
Excellent.
So yeah, it's
So I think we're actually out of time, right? Is that correct, Graham?
Yep, we have hit our 45-minute mark. Means
Okay.
we're out of time for the 6th NixOS office hours. It looks like we managed to start streaming the audio about a quarter of the way through. So some of that was preserved. So next time will be even better. Just some
Certainly.
closing notes here. NixCon 2019 is still coming up, October 25th through the 27th in Brno, Czech Republic. And you can go to 2019.nixcon.org to get tickets. I think there are still several available. However, the Hack Day is sold out now. Twig.io is looking to hire full-time remote engineers to work on Nix and related tools. Our next office hours will be October 18th. And if you'd like to be a guest in a future call, please complete the form that World of Peace is going to share in the chat and on IRC. And I believe it's also on the document about about NixOS office hours page. Thank you all so much for coming, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Exactly.
Bye.
Bye.